What's going on, killers? Welcome back to Gunfighter Life. Saddle up for another episode where we talk about guns and gunfighting. The right way, with God at the center, and real world first-hand experience. Today we're going to be talking about Polymer striker-fired handguns. I know sometimes I kind of knock on those and say not everything has to be a black Polymer striker-fired handgun. But a lot of guns are that. It's kind of the way of the industry right now. They generally have a low learning curve as far as handguns go. And they are cheap and easy to produce. At least comparatively to some other handgun designs. They are kind of the standard 9mm Polymer striker-fired handguns. So let's talk about what I would consider several of the best new Polymer striker-fired handguns. At the time of this recording, on the first day of September in the year of our Lord, 2022. I'll plug in the bio if you want to skip it. Skip around 3 minutes and 45 seconds, and God willing, there'll be some good and useful information on Polymer striker-fired handguns. Who am I? A question we should all ask ourselves. I am, first and foremost, a servant of God, made in His very own image, a follower of Jesus Christ, a simple man called by God to the Great Commission to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Next, a little bit about my background and what God has allowed me to do and blessed me to do in life. Grew up what most would consider very poor in the backwoods of the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States. Hunting and fishing. Joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. So a decorated Marine Corps combat veteran. Infantry assaultman. After the combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps under Mojave Viper. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. Also a veteran of law enforcement. I served with LAPD. I was a sworn peace officer, a cop for LAPD. I worked regular patrol assignments and more specialized assignments. One of those more specialized assignments was warrant service, fugitive recovery. Also had some other law enforcement roles. I am an FBI certified firearms instructor and been certified by another 3-letter government agency in a lot of firearms and training things. I've also been a private contractor, worked in the private sector, pertaining to tactics and gunfighting and protecting America from enemies foreign and domestic. I served as the commander of a tactical team to stop active shooters in a large metropolitan area. That was our primary mission, to stop active shooters, which sadly are a thing in America today. I've also been blessed to do quite a bit of competition shooting. Started my first formal competitions even before joining the Marine Corps at 17. I had won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I have competed in all manner of disciplines in shooting. I've been blessed to be a state rifle and pistol champion, West Coast regional champion. Like I said, been blessed to win more shooting competitions than I can remember. Mentioned hunting. I've hunted to put meat on the table starting when I was a child. I've also been a professional big game hunter and guide, hunting and slaying all manner of beast. And I don't apologize for that. Humbled to be the host of 3 podcasts. Simple Man Sermons, Alpha Male Podcast, and Gunfighter Life. Obviously, as things not mentioned, I've been blessed to do many other things. But, again, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God, a believer and follower of the Bible, the Word, Jesus Christ. And I don't apologize for that. With that, let's transition into today's topic. Caveat this Polymer striker-fired handgun discussion and what I mentioned in the beginning. The best new. And I'm going to loosely define new as in the past several years. Obviously, if I was doing the top of all time, it would be the Glock 17. But that girl's been around a while. So not on the list today. Also, my all-time favorite Polymer striker-fired handgun, the Smith & Wesson M&P, specifically the Pro. God has blessed me to win more competitions with that handgun than any other. For that reason, it'll always kind of have a special place in my heart. But it doesn't make the list. It's not new. You're looking at like cutting edge, new to the market, but still proven and reliable Polymer striker-fired handguns for 2022 and 2023. What would be some of my top choices? Now, the first one we're going to talk about, the Walther Pdp. I think Walther's kind of a sleeper, and to a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are not gun sommeliers, that are not into all the different nuances and everything of handguns, and maybe they know Glock, they know Smith & Wesson, they know SIG, but Walther's kind of not in that top tier. But they make top tier guns. The Walther Pdp really impressed me. When you look at it in pictures, you're just kind of like, okay, to be fair, it's not the prettiest handgun in my opinion, and it looks kind of big and bulky, even when you see it in a case. But when you pick it up and handle it, it's much lighter and much more ergonomic than it looks on a page or in a case. The triggers on them are nice. Probably in the top of Polymer striker-fired handgun triggers I've ever felt out of the box. Granted, I'm still a fan of single action. I carry a single action day to day. I don't know that a Polymer striker-fired handgun, at least without a safety, could ever safely have a trigger as nice as a single action. And I don't just mean weight, because weight's not everything. I mean the feel of it, the crispness of it, the elegance of it, the predictability of it. I like a single action trigger. But most people are going to shoot striker-fired handguns. Of striker-fired handgun triggers, the Walther Pdp has a fantastic trigger. It has really good ergonomics. It fits the hand. It's modular, meaning that you can change it to the size of your hand. Kind of pioneered by the Smith & Wesson M&P back in the day. May not have been the first one, but the first one to really make that popular. Glock started doing that with their Gen 4s and things like that. But the Walther Pdp has that, and it starts off with better ergonomics. It has really, really good ergonomics. It comes cut for an optic, which if you're going to get into handguns right now, whether you want an optic or not, you should probably get a handgun cut for an optic. That is the way of the future. I was kind of against optics for a while, and then I actually ran them and said, you know what, I'm going to give it an honest try, a fair shake, and run these guns hard. And I did, and you know what, they're better for most situations. Not for everything, but they are. So if you're going to get into handguns, even if you don't want a optical sight right away in your handgun, at least consider getting one that's cut for it. And the Walther Pdp comes cut for that optic. The sights I don't remember being anything to write home about. In fact, they're kind of cheesy if you ask me, but just like the Glock sights, you replace them. The Walther Pdp is a good handgun. A good striker-fire pistol. It kind of rides that line really well, as in, if I was allowed to and I was going to be a police officer again, I would not have any problem carrying that thing on duty. Be a good duty sidearm. Also, if you told me you were going to pay for me to shoot competition for the next 6 months, and I had to run a Walther Pdp in production division, I'd be like, okay. I would just right out of the box, and I would not bat an eye about it. I would not feel bad about it. It wouldn't be my choice if I was picking myself, but if somebody's going to pay all the fees and buy all the ammo, and they said I had to run a Walther Pdp, you know, I wouldn't feel undergunned, I guess is what I'm getting at. It rides that line really well from being able to be a patrol car and a race car. It's a cool gun. If I had any negatives to say, I honestly just don't like the way it looks. To be fair, I don't know if that's really important, but it kind of makes the Glock look good, especially the slide. I'm just not a big fan of it. It works well, it's ergonomic, I just don't like the way that it looks. But as far as performance goes in a polymer striker-fired handgun, I got nothing against it. Maybe one of the other colors that it comes in might make it look a little bit better. And I don't believe they're prohibitively expensive. In fact, I don't know that they're any more expensive than a Glock. And if you put those both on the table, I'd certainly pick the Walther Pdp over a Glock of comparable size. I believe they make a 4-inch, a 4.5-inch, and a 5-inch. Whatever the comparable one is, if you put that one and the Glock down next to it, I would pick the Walther for sure, even if it was cheaper. So that's the Walther Pdp in a nutshell, my summation of it. The next one really surprised me. The Canik Rival. This is the opposite one of this because I think this gun is beautiful. And ironically, I just thought about this when I was thinking of this list in my head. It didn't occur to me, but I believe it's based on the Smith & Wesson / Walther, the old Smith & Wesson 99 design, which Walther made for a while. Walther may have even come out with it first. Either way, it's in that lineage. I think it was way ahead of its time, and people didn't really cling to it because it was so far ahead of its time. And then when the patent went up on it, Canik got it and ran with it. But it's a great design and a great gun, and Canik has been making these for years and years. The Rival is not really a brand new model in my opinion. You might call it a new model, but it's really an evolution of those older Caniks based on the Smith & Wesson 99, which is a very proven design. The Canik Rival just kind of brings that to the next level. Now, if you put both of these on the table, I would certainly pick the Canik Rival over the Walther Pdp. Unless it was for a duty gun, most agencies probably aren't going to let you carry that for a duty gun. But the Canik does come. This one comes right out of the box, cut for an optic. Not only that, but of all the optics that I've mounted on handguns, and I've mounted quite a few, not just for myself, but for many others, Canik has the best factory out-of-the-box way to mount an optic that I have ever seen. It seems to be well thought out and engineered. It has a ridge running down the center, which I think is really going to help with stress on that system. My least favorite one is the Glock. It seems like they just, as an afterthought, went, how can we possibly mount an optic to this? Let's just put some holes in the slide. You look at the Canik, the Rival, and the ones before it, and it has a beefy, and I mean beefy, mounting system. That was one of my things that kind of kept me away from red dots in the beginning. I thought, oh, they're not going to hold up. But the red dot's only as good as the mounting option. If you have 4 little chintzy screws and any one of those is a point of failure, you're introducing more complexity into the system. Again, in my opinion, what I've seen, Canik has the best mounting system out of the box that I have seen. I've worked with a lot of the big brands on mounting optics. Now, my number one recommendation, this is aside, if you have a gun that you really like, have it directly cut out. If you know the optic, if you're set on, yes, I am going to run this gun and this optic, have it machined and cut out specifically for that optic. That's your best solution. It's the least complicated. You have the least amount of moving parts. Have it machined out for the biggest, beefiest screws you can shove in that thing and be done with it. Still kind of in my opinion, in the beta testing phase of optics. There's all kinds of different cuts. There's no real standard. You got your Trijicon, you got your Leopold, you got your Doctor. There's not really a standard. But if you know which pattern you want and which optic you want, maybe best just to get it cut for that optic. But the Canik, of all the ones, to go back to what I was talking about, has the best factory mounting system. Not only that, but unlike a lot of other guns, it doesn't just come with kind of a filler plate and then you have to buy the mounting plate. It comes with several, I want to say 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly, but it comes with several of the most common mounting plates. I mean, you could get that gun and you could mount a Trijicon, or you could mount a Hollow Sun, or you could mount a Leopold Delta Point, or you could mount a, Vortex. Comes with all those pieces, which a lot of times those can be, $50 to $100 pieces. You get 3 of them with the gun, 3 or maybe even 4. Comes with a mag well, which again can be a fairly expensive part, $50 to $100 for a good mag well sometimes. Comes with all that stuff. More important to me, it comes with a really good trigger. It comes with a flat trigger. It comes with a phenomenal flat, clean trigger. The most like a 1911, that's not a 1911. I mean, it's not a 1911. It's never going to be. Polymer striker fire pistols, again, just aren't going to be that single action trigger pull. At least not factory ones, and be safe. But that Canik flat face trigger with that large segment in the middle, that Canik Rival trigger specifically, is probably the best design and engineered trigger I've seen on a polymer gun. Polymer striker fired handgun, that is. The Canik Rival is a really good gun. It seems really well engineered. It seems not like some cheap, crappy import. It honestly seems like it has better quality than a lot of other guns. You look at, like, say, the machining on the barrel and things like that. It looks fantastic. So I've never personally run a Canik. I've known some guys that have ran Caniks. I can't speak too much about the earlier models of Canik. They may have had some issues. I don't really know, but I know over the last couple of years, everyone that I've ever seen has been solid. So if you're the guy that always looking for like the bargain, the best deal, the most bang for your buck, I think you get far more features with the Canik than any of the other guns on the list for the price point. I don't really want to say dollar signs and prices. One, because I'm living off grid right now and I can't look it up. And two, because it's inflation. What I tell you today might be different by the time the podcast comes out, literally. But if one goes up, they're probably all going to go up. So I think I can speak to the value of it and say that they are a good deal and a good value. In fact, if they were 50% more money, I'd still say they were a good value. Anyway, the Canik Rival. So if Canik wasn't on your radar, the Rival wasn't on your radar, I'd say check those out. They are a really cool gun. Now let's talk about perhaps the oldest gun on the list. And the 320 is by no means new. But the M17, I'm still going to call at the time of this recording a newish gun. The M17, basically just 320, yes. With a thumb safety, which you could argue is a good or a bad thing. But the M17 is the Army's new handgun. The U.S. military's, for that matter, new service handgun. The M17 and the M18, if you're not familiar, the M17 is the full size. The M17 is the compact. If you want to call it that, it basically just has a shorter barrel and slide. Even the military is going with an optics-ready handgun. So again, if you're going to get a handgun, get it optics-ready. All the ones on the list today are optics-ready. The M17 and M18, and I'll be honest, I didn't want to like these. If you, considering this, I did a whole podcast on the M17 called The Gun That I Hate to Love. I want to look that up and listen to it. Anyway, I got one of these as a beater. It came in a store used. Got it for like $400. I said I'm going to beat the crap out of it, run it with an optic because I want to get used to running an optic on an actual duty, carryable handgun. I got it, I ran it, I carried it, and I love it. It's a good gun. And I say that begrudgingly because I so much like 1911s. Although I still carry a single action, day-to-day, full-size gun as my EDC. For me, my favorite polymer striker fired handgun is the M17 and the M18 likewise. I don't own one of those, but same gun with a shorter barrel, shorter slide. The way I carry strong side hip, I don't really see the appeal. In fact, I see a lot of negatives to going with a shorter barrel. That said, the M17, M18 are good guns. They do have that whole chassis system. So let's start with the positives of this gun. Okay, it got adopted by the military. As that goes with pretty much anything, you're probably going to be able to get this gun, get the magazines, get parts for this gun for a long, long time. Will the Canik Rival be in obscurity in 3 years? Maybe. Will Walther drop the PDP in lieu of some other new hot thing? Maybe. But with the M17, you can be fairly certain, as far as you can with anything in the handgun industry, that gun and the parts and the following and serviceability is going to be there for quite a while. Also magazines, which is not a small thing. Walther, the Canik, I do believe they have proprietary magazines. And ones that aren't cheap. Not that I think cheap is the number one criteria when looking at a magazine. The availability certainly should be considered. And since it takes a 320 magazine, it may even take the 250 magazine, which the 320 was based on. I'm not sure about that. But it definitely takes the 320 magazines and the M17, M18 magazines. I would be very surprised if other companies didn't start making aftermarket magazines for the 320, M17, M18, kind of becoming a dominant part of the market. I don't know that they'll ever supplant Glock as like the number one, but as far as margins go, they're probably solidly number two as far as volume of like handgun magazines. And if you don't know about the 320, the M17, M18, the chassis is modular. The firearms part, at least for right now with the ATF, is the only serialized part that needs to be regulated. And you can just buy a fire control unit and build your own if you want. I do believe you can buy the fire control units with the safeties of the M17, M18, but they certainly make other chassis. But even if you just buy an M17, M18, if you want to put a cooler looking slide on there with a bunch of cuts in it, or you want a fluted barrel, or you want a threaded barrel, or whatever, you can get those. And a lot of times you can get those not even made by SIG. Get aftermarket companies that make those. I know Wilson Combat has a grip module. How do I know? Because it's on mine. Nothing wrong with the factory grip module, but it's not an expensive upgrade, and I like the Wilson Combat better. The ergonomics better, I like the grippiness of it better, and you know what? I swapped it right out. That's a big advantage of this gun over the other ones that we talked about. Now, that may or may not matter to you. You may be the kind of person that just buys the M17 and runs it the way that it is, and it's a fine gun like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that it is modular is a bonus. The trigger on the M17, the 320, are fantastic, and in my experience, they only get better the more that you shoot them. Are they a 1911 trigger? No. But they make a Glock trigger feel like pulling a piano down a gravel road. They are nice, they are clean, they are lighter, even the shape and ergonomics of the trigger. And they're just, a solid metal trigger, which I like, opposed to a multi-part plastic trigger on a Glock. Polymer, whatever. I like that. I think it has a good trigger pull for a striker-fired handgun out of the box. You can mount an optic on the M17, M18. It's not the best system, but it's certainly not the worst system. I've used mine pretty hard and it hasn't come loose. Now, I did get an adapter plate for mine so I could co-witness iron sights, put in higher iron sights, mounted a Trijicom RMR on it. It's a good gun. It's a solid gun. I would have no worries carrying that on duty, in the military. I was kind of upset, I'll be honest, that they won the contract. Not because there's anything wrong with the handgun, just because I'm not sure how good the contract was done. It may have been done fine, I'm just not sure. I probably would have picked the Glock for the military handgun, and not because I like Glocks. If you listen for any length of time, you know it's not my favorite. I just know how soldiers and Marines treat stuff, and I figured the Glock would stand up to that kind of abuse. But that being said, again, the gun that I hate to love. The M17 is a fantastic gun. It's the military's new handgun, so if for no other reason, maybe you just want a modern piece of military history that you can carry and protect yourself with. That's pretty cool. Now, thus far in the podcast, it's been pretty much full-size fighting handguns, combat handguns. And there's a reason for that. And I'm going to get a little bit preachy here. And some of you may not like that. And to that I would say, tough, this is not your podcast. I don't even hopefully consider this my podcast. I consider all that I have belonging to God. So let's look into God's instruction manual for people, the Bible. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Also in God's instruction in His law. You shall not stand idly by while someone takes the life of your neighbor. Also the stranger who dwells among you shall be as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. I hope that if you're listening to this, you see it as your duty, your responsibility as a man made in the image of God. The Lord is a man of war, Exodus 15. You see it as your duty to protect not just yourself, but those around you. The women and the children, the stranger. Of guns that you can have on you, I think a full-size fighting handgun, mostly for the ergonomics and shootability, or the best tool for that, again, that you can have on you. So I always go to those first. My go-to carry handguns are full-size fighting handguns. If you were just worried about getting carjacked at a 7-Eleven at 2 a.m. First of all, I'd say try not to be at a 7-Eleven at 2 a.m. And second, I'd say, yeah, probably a compact or subcompact handgun would be fine in that situation. But our world has rapidly changed in the past, I don't know. It's always changing, but it seems like it at an accelerated pace in the past several years. Active shooters are not just a thing that happened, like in Columbine. They're a thing that seems to happen, sadly, with some degree of frequency. Mass shootings, mob violence, things like that. That's a world that we live in. I hope you see it as your duty as a man to provide and protect. Jesus said to his disciples, "Let he who has no sword sell his cloak and buy one." Hope you see it as your duty. I know there's this thing about the sheepdog, but I consider myself a shepherd, and hopefully a good shepherd. Shepherds kill things that attack their flock. At least, that's part of their job. David, a man after God's own heart, when he goes to fight against Goliath, when he goes to King Saul, he tells King Saul that he's killed lions and bears to protect his flock, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them. It's part of his job as a shepherd. We see shepherds all throughout the Bible. They protect the flock. Now, I love my dog, my Rhodesian Ridgeback Alexander Hamilton, but I'm not a dog. I'm better than a dog. I'm a higher creation than a dog. I'm a man. I'm a strong man made in the image of God. And hopefully you are too. And you see it as part of your duty to provide and protect. That being said, I know that there are a large portion of the population that can't or won't carry a full-size fighting handgun day to day. I'd say if that's the case, try and have one closer if it's not on your body. However you can get that accomplished. Or a long gun. But I'll concede that sometimes the best option, or the only option, may be a smaller handgun. Now let's get back into the pistol models that we talked about. Of all the small polymer striker-fired handguns, the one that really took the market by storm, and I still think is probably the best in this arena, is the SIG 365. The things that I said about the 320, minus the military adopting it, obviously. It's got a modular system. It's a big chunk of the market share in that part of the market. Not as a whole, but as far as small, compact, striker-fired 9mm handguns go. And what kind of made this pistol stand out? It was by far not the first, small, handy, lightweight 9mm, let's say, subcompact carry gun. But it was the first one to shove in a lot of rounds. You get far more rounds with this than you would of the more classic, Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, which is still a good gun. But for that reason, and the fact that it's modular, and it comes with good sights, and I don't think the base model is not, but there are plenty of models that are optics ready, even on a small handgun like this. I'd say of all these small subcompact handguns, the SIG 365 is probably the best one. And I'm not a SIG fanboy, but if they make the best tool for the job, I'm going to say that. Anyway, the SIG 365 gives you a lot of firepower in a small package. And unlike most super small handguns, it's not as good to shoot, in my opinion, or as good a fighting handgun as one of the others we talked about. But it's certainly good for its size. If you measure it against its peers, guns in that size range, weight range, concealability range, probably more importantly, it is kind of a cut above. I know there's a Springfield Hellcat, not a fan. I'll just leave it there. I like the SIG 365 for that, and I don't even own one. I'm not super concerned about capacity. The subcompact 9mm handgun, that's my go-to. I've had for years and years. I've run it hard. It shoots accurate. It's a good gun. But it's not new, so it doesn't make this list. But of all the newer ones, I'd say the 365 is probably the best by a considerable margin. Anyway, with that, man, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Gunfighter Life. If you do like consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com. If you like the podcast, you like the message, or you just want to contact me, goodshepherdtraining.com. As a thanks for staying tuned to the end of the episode and listening to all that, you know that I like to throw out a tactical tip on most episodes. Pull-ups. You may think that it has nothing to do with shooting a handgun well. Well, I beg to differ. Number one, actually doing pull-ups will make you stronger and will likely give you a much stronger grip, which will actually translate into you being usually a better handgun shooter, especially fast and accurate. But that's not really a tactical tip of the day. If you've ever done any amount of pull-ups in different places, you'll know that unless there's some crazy texture thing, almost always the thinner and smaller the bar, the more pull-ups you can likely do because you can grip that pull-up bar better with a smaller circumference of the bar. Now, how does this relate to handguns? Well, a lot of people will pick up a handgun or the modularity part of it and get what feels best in their hands. You're not a woman. Stop doing stuff based on feelings. Do it based on reality and truth, and in this case, physics. If you can get a tighter, more full grip on the handgun, that's almost certainly going to be better. However it feels, it's almost always better to go with a smaller grip than a larger grip, even if it doesn't feel as good. The exception to that would be if your hands are so gigantic that you can't get proper trigger finger placement on that gun. Then yeah, you probably need a bigger grip, giving you a longer length of pull from the back strap to the face of the trigger, depending on your hands. But other than that, you're probably going to be able to shoot faster and more accurate, getting more hits on target quickly with a smaller grip. Like that pull-up bar. The smaller it is in circumference, the more grip you can apply to it, the more pull-ups you can do if that's your weak point on the grip, and a big fat pull-up bar. Anyway, hopefully you'll consider function over feeling next time you're messing with handgun grips, especially if yours is modular and you can choose. Give that a consideration. That's your tactical tip of the day. I was laying in bed last night next to my wife, and she had already fallen asleep, and I was laying there praying to God and pondering life, as hopefully we all do, and reading Ecclesiastes 3. I thought I might share that with you all today. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. With that, men, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.